According to the Washington Post database called Fatal Force, 509 people have been shot and killed by the police in the U.S. so far just this year. 24% of those were black people. And that's despite the fact that the black population only makes up 13% of the total population of the United States. We want to take a closer look at those numbers. Joining me now is one of the reporters who worked on that database. This is Kimbrielle Kelly, and she's an investigative journalist with the Washington Post. She joins us from our Washington studio. So Kimbrielle, thank you very much for joining us. I'm wondering what inspired you and the Washington Post to start collecting this data?
Well, after Ferguson happened, we realized that the numbers that the FBI were keeping around officer-involved shootings, the fatalities, was really very low. And so we took it upon ourselves to track those numbers using internet sources, public records, and making telephone calls to try to figure out what a more accurate number was. And we found that first year that there were nearly 1,000 officer-involved fatal shootings, and our number was more than twice the number of the FBI numbers. And so we realized that we wanted to take a look at that number in the second year as well. So we continued to track those numbers in 2016.
So let me ask you the thing that everyone wants to know, which is, are black people being disproportionately killed by various U.S. police departments?
Based on our research, we found that African Americans were disproportionately killed by officers, actually at a rate of 2.5 times greater than those who are white.
Any sense of why that's happening in the data?
That's a good question. I think the numbers speak for themselves, and we also saw some other trends too. In addition to the race issue, we also said that people who were mentally ill were a big portion of the victims of those shootings as well.
Now, I understand these type of numbers are not collected by the U.S. government. Why isn't the government collecting this data, considering what a major political issue this is?
Well, there is a focus on collecting the data now. So the FBI has acknowledged, as you mentioned, that the system of collecting data was inadequate. Having 6% of the departments report this data, you're not getting a real understanding of what it is. So starting next year, we're supposed to see more accurate reporting of not only this, but other instances in which police officers use force, not just with firearms.
What's been the response to the data that you've put out on Washington Post? Because I've seen it shared on social media so many times in the past week. I'm wondering what you're hearing.
I mean, it's a really good response. People are happy that there's more accurate reporting. They feel like the racial issue, which can sometimes be talked about in anecdote, actually has numbers to show, as I mentioned, 2.5 times greater the rate for African Americans. So if you take a look at the victims of these incidents, about half of them are white. But as you mentioned, the smaller share of African Americans in this country, around 13%, to have a rate that's 2.5 times greater means that there is a problem. So people are definitely interested in trying to fix this and resolve this, as you've heard from the president, as well as people who are really in policing. And the Department of Justice has taken a huge effort to try to remedy these problems at, problematic police departments as well.
We've certainly gotten the sense this week that the U.S. has hit a boiling point with the violence that we've seen. What are you hoping will happen with your data? What do you hope to achieve with it?
Well, it's already clear that the FBI is making changes, so I think that's a very good first step. You also see the Department of Justice continuing to take a stand and not just suggesting recommended changes to police departments, but really mandating them in courts and being willing to take police departments to courts over these types of violations. And as they work with police departments across the country, they're suggesting changes and mandating them, frankly, for training, for record keeping, for risk management, that they hope in the end of the day will make these better police departments, and that the changes that are made at the bigger departments will in some regards trickle down to the remaining 15,000 to 18,000 police departments across the country.